Okay, I guess I'll start. Um, and the couple of first minutes is going to be about logistics introduction. So the people that are joining us later won't miss that much, but we want to use as much as Michael's time. So thanks everyone for joining us. This is an Agile leadership webinar, which Michael agreed to um, come and speak for us, which we are truly honored. And it's one of the first webinars that I'm trying at the Lean Agile Camp. We are trying to host. So I'm going to talk a little about the Lean Agile Camp and what you can get out of that. Lean Agile Can is an attempt to elevate our community, Canadians, in their Agile and Lean journey. We do this by, for now, we are using webinar and recordings that are available to the Canadian to host it on our website. And the first webinar, we are having it with Michael, which is, again, thanks for him to joining us. Some notes to keep considering. The website is very new, very brand new. So if you have challenges following the website or navigating the website, please bear with us. If you want to get the latest, please subscribe to our newsletter. And we are trying to put as many good resources on the website with focus on the recordings of good meetups. If you know any of those that you can help with the level of our website, please let us know that. And this couldn't be accomplished without the help of the community and one of our sponsors, Elevate Change, which I talk about a little bit about that. At Elevate Change, we are helping organizations and individuals to elevate their game. Last night, we announced a personal elevation program, or for short, PEP Talk, which if you guys want to know more about, you can reach out to me. What else about? Oh, and one thing about the newsletter, we tend to use this newsletter for not only sending out the webinar invite but for more general aspect of sending notification too. So if you don't want, you always have the option to unsubscribe, but you might not get the webinar information. You always can subscribe to the RSS feed or come and check the website, or I usually put it on my LinkedIn and Twitter as well. So there are many ways to be notified about our next webinars. And that's it for the website and our new movement, Lean Agile Camp. A little bit about our guest speaker today, Michael Hammond. I was honored to know him from a while ago that I did my Agile coaching course with him and Lisa Atkins from the Agile Coaching Institute. He was a principal at that time with Lisa Atkins. Now he's a senior faculty member, and not to confuse him with Michael Spade. There are two Michaels involved in the Agile Coaching Institute. He recently, he is a coach, mentor, and a thought leader in our space. And he's one of the first people that gets his hands dirty with Scrum. So he is bringing lots of experience and knowledge into Agile world. And he recently wrote a book called Evolvagility. It's about growing an Agile leadership culture from the inside out, which is the topic of our talk as well. He is doing some workshops. He's a co-founder and as himself and the other co-founder of Agile Leadership Institute. They are having workshops around the world for the Agile leadership called Evolvagility Workshop. They are having it in Stockholm and London for now, but North America and hopefully Toronto would be a possibility. Vital, and that said, before starting the conversation with Michael, I want to give you guys a flow of the session or the logistics. So this webinar would be mostly a conversation rather than only Michael talking to us. So I'll start the conversation with Michael and ask him some questions. If you guys have some questions, please put it in the chat option of this Zoom, and we get to the questions as much as we can. And what Michael wanted us to be able to do, if you are asking a question, he likes to see us, to see the person that asking the question. So when you're asking the question, if you turn off your video and ask him and get in a dialogue with him rather than one of us reading the question for him, that's very beneficial. With all that being said, let's get to the webinar itself, Agile Leadership, and let me stop this one and go to the gallery view as Michael.
Thank you, Shaheen. Thank you for all of that, and welcome everybody. If you feel comfortable and it doesn't tax the bandwidth too much, I'd love it if you turn on your video. Even though you're muted, I like to be able to feel like I'm talking to people as opposed to just talking into my computer screen. This is an experimental medium, and those of you who know me know that I work best when I'm in conversation. So hence the format of today. So the way this will work is that Shaheen will ask me some sort of prompting questions, and that'll be kind of like a key that will turn me on, and I'll do a lot of talking, and you may have some questions as I'm speaking, and feel free to jot them into the chat window. As Shaheen said, I prefer to hear people ask their questions directly. Shaheen and I will talk for about 20 minutes, and then we'll open up the conversation to the rest of you. So, Shaheen, let's get started.
Yeah. So, first of all, I want to ask you what lead you to the work that you're doing right now? Can you tell us more about how you get to the place that you are now and what the work that you are doing right now?
Yeah. So, God, there's so many ways to tackle that, but to take the shortest, quickest path through all of it, I got exposed to coaching and group facilitation back in the 1980s. And I was involved with a company that did transformational training programs, which were personal development programs in a group setting. And so I got trained in that environment back in the 80s. And when I came into the 90s, among the other things that I did, there were significantly other things that I did, but I'm not going to get into that, is that I continued to coach teams, specifically software teams, and particularly software teams in startups. So throughout the 90s, I worked with a lot of very small startup companies, helping their software teams get better at delivering software. Mm-hmm. There was a technical aspect, and there was a human aspect of that. And I found myself getting more interested in the human aspect, because it seemed to me that the hardest thing in any significant effort is the human aspect, the human dimension, which we're going to talk quite a bit more in this session. That got me into studying professional coaching. I got certified as a professional coach. I studied group dynamics. I actually did psychology of group dynamics and organization development, systems thinking. And I integrated all that into how I worked with teams, and then more and more with organizations. Agile came along in the late 90s, early 2000s. I got on that whole, I started integrating that. And I started doing exclusively Agile consulting back around 2001. And I entered the corporate world with Agile as an Agile coach back in 2004. And for me, that was like a game changer, because the complexity in organizations was so much greater than it was in small startup kind of companies. And I relished in it, and I loved it. And so I continued to grow as a coach, as facilitating groups, and working with large enterprises to help mainly leaders and managers think through what needs to shift in us as leaders and managers. And I'm coming close to the end of this long piece. So the significant thing that I saw in all of that is that the leaders who most get it about what it means to be an Agile leader kept saying to me, I want to meet people, but I want them to meet me halfway. In other words, I want people to start to develop their own leadership. And a kind of a huge insight or breakthrough came for me because I realized that Agile leadership in the 21st century is necessarily a kind of a yin-yang proposition. It's something that needs to happen from the top, but it also needs to happen from below. In other words, it needs to happen everywhere, and hence the term everywhere. Leadership is an everywhere phenomenon, not everyone, not every single person, but everywhere. Anywhere where somebody sees that there's something they're committed to, something that they are that they care enough about to actually do something about it. And what that is, I think we're going to get into that.
Okay.
How's that?
Yeah. Thank you for that. You talked about moving from the startup coaching to the large organizational that you got involved, and you saw more complexity. I saw in your talks and your book you talked about predict and plan and sense and respond. Was that? Can you tell us more about that? And was this journey that you have from the startup world to the large organization added to this predict and plan and sense and respond, or could this be applied to both worlds?
Well, so I think it's predict and plan versus sense and respond. I think of it and talk about it as a mindset shift. And it's a shift that can happen both in terms of like Agile delivery practices. So you can think of Scrum as a way to help software teams move from a predict and plan waterfall approach to delivery to a more sense and respond approach. So I've been talking about the difference between predict and plan versus sense and respond from the perspective of software delivery, but also from the perspective of organizations. So organizations, even at one of the biggest challenges for organizations right now is that you have software delivery teams that are getting pretty good, I say pretty good, not great necessarily, but pretty good at moving from a predict and plan approach to a sense and respond approach to delivering software. The problem is that the larger organization, that's a bigger boat to move. And it takes longer and it's a lot harder. And so for years, I worked in the domain of trying to help large enterprises make that mindset shift. And what I realized was that I was barking up the wrong tree. That the tree that needed barking up was a tree that had to do with individual leadership development, like individual mindset. And this notion that there's this culture that exists, I can't think of culture as separate from individual mindset. And so I started integrating ideas from developmental psychology, from executive coaching, what I knew about executive coaching, to start to help people begin to grow their own inner leadership. And so it became a kind of what I call an inner game. And so as opposed to growing our competencies, it's about growing our inner sense-making capability. And so that was the big shift. So the shift from predict and plan to sense and respond is really an individual shift in our own inner game, like how we approach life, how we approach the world, how we approach our workplace, how we approach relationships. From predicting and planning, like having some kind of prediction, and when things don't go the way that we want them to go or that we expect them to go, we become upset. By the way, I'm speaking to every one of us because we all do this. We are all predict and plan machines.
Right.
We are. It's in our psychological and emotional DNA. The thing is that DNA is not hardwired. That's the beautiful thing. That's what neuroscience is now telling us, that the brain and the mind is not hardwired. And the science and the research that's been going on for decades in developmental psychology tells us that it's not only possible, but actually desirable for us to shift our minds, to shift those set of assumptions that has us be predict and plan machines in order to develop the sense and respond capacity that each of us, that we actually really need to start to bring more of, each of us, as opposed to waiting for those senior leaders to get on board. So that was a huge mouthful. Let's see what you can do with that.
I'm trying to put the sense and respond with the everywhere phenomenon as you talked about it. So sense and respond would be something that is individual based, like individual sense and respond, or are you talking in a way that a system can sense and respond, or are you?
It's absolutely all of those things. And here's the thing. A system can develop its capacity to sense and respond to the degree that the individuals within that system can develop their inner capacity for sense and respond. And what that looks like is the capacity to be able to stand in the face of the unknown, to stand in the face of uncertainty. So I'm going to invite each of you to look in your own lives, particularly your own work lives, and look to see to what degree is it hard for you to stay present in the face of uncertainty or of ambiguity and not be overcome by your anxiety. And believe me, I deal with my own anxiety every day. And the thing that I think is different for me, than 15 years ago, is that I've discovered that it's possible to develop a practice to not be run by your anxiety, to be run instead by the vision that you have for whatever it is you're wanting to create in your world.
I want to take us a little bit, my assumption is that it's deeper when you talk about inside out phenomena.
Yes,
Would you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, that's in a sense what I'm pointing to in this, that the subtitle of the book and the sort of the catchphrase for the work that we do at Agile Leadership Institute is that what we're up to is to help organizations and individuals grow an agile leadership culture from within themselves. And going back to the idea that I just mentioned a moment ago, that to the degree that each of us as individuals can grow our inner sense and respond capability, which is our ability to stand in the face of uncertainty, of ambiguity, of complexity, and still be able to be deliberate in our choices. To that degree, that's what we mean by inside. That's growing our inner selves from the inside out. To the degree that we're able to do that, our behaviors become more sophisticated, more congruent with that which needs to happen in order to create a more broadly sense and respond system, broadly sense and respond organization. This might be a good time, actually, to invite questions. Actually people ask some questions. What do you think, Shaheen?
Yeah, we have some.
I'm seeing a few puzzled looks, and I feel like if we open this up, we might be able to get more input, like questions that help, because I fear that what I'm saying might come across as too abstract. So who has a question, and how can they signal that they have a question, Shaheen?
If you put it in the chat or let me know that I unmute you, you can ask the question. I guess, Mara, you want to ask a question? Yeah.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Mara. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Hello, Mara.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I'm seeing only the top part of your head. Okay, great. Hi, Mara.
Hi.
Yeah.
It's not so much a question, it's a comment. So maybe a way to make it more concrete.
Mm-hmm.
It's if you're trying to do something in an agile way And the people in the larger organization are used to having a predictable plan, like with the road milestones and Gantt charts and all that, quote unquote. It's like the weakest link. So if there's a key person who isn't able to make that shift of not having that certainty, that then the team may struggle, or the teams may struggle in evolving to a more sense and respond to what changes are happening in your backlog of work.
Right.
That's
So that's a comment and
comment. So is that kind of what you mean at a very sort of surface level example of what it might look like when you don't have people?
Well, let's explore that for a moment. So imagine you're in an environment like that where the teams sort of get agile, they sort of get this sense and respond approach, but they're being stymied by the fact that the broader organization, the management and the structures and the systems and the processes in place don't put a kind of a ceiling on top of that. Is that kind of a way of saying that? So here's the thing. Usually what I see happen in those situations is a kind of us versus them, a systemic dynamic that emerges. And what any coach, Agile coach or Scrum Master or anyone who has a stake in the success of Agile in this environment is going to want to be able to do is to diffuse that dynamic. So first of all, do you know what I mean by that dynamic? Is that something you see as well? Yeah. So to the degree that we as Agile coaches and Scrum Masters are willing to look at that, so that's a moment of uncertainty, isn't it? It's kind of like it's uncomfortable, isn't it? Yes. To actually see that happening. And oftentimes we feel anxiety, and where we go with that anxiety is we take sides. And as good Agilists, the side we're going to take is the side that's pro-Agile in that dynamic, yes? Mm-hmm. So what's needed is for us as Agile coaches, I'm going to call us Agile leaders because that's really what we are, right? As leaders, we're individuals who care about our world, who are willing to take responsibility to some degree for our world. And in this situation, wouldn't it be cool, wouldn't it be useful, more useful, if we could stand back from our anxiety and look at what's going on and interact with what's going on in a way to help with however we can to diffuse that dynamic. Because the truth is that the predict and plan people in that organization are not wrong. And if we can let go of our own attachment to our preference and to actually begin to have real conversations with people and to develop skillfulness in having those conversations with people, things are going to go a lot better. They may not go how we predict. By the way, as Agilists, we tend to be very predict and plan. We predict that if teams take up these Scrum practices, they're going to be Agile. And if that's not happening, it must be the fault of the organization. We go to all those places, which is not useful, which is not coaching, by the way. So this is a perfect example of being able to the degree that we can, to be able to transcend the anxiety that's driving us and be able to have a more complex relationship with what's going on. So I'm going to just shut up for a minute and hear what you think about that. And then if anybody else wants to jump in on this particular part of the conversation, we can invite you. So what do you think, Mara?
Very good point. We do behave that way. It's like, how come they don't get it? This is cool. So it gave me a lot to think about. I don't have more to ask or add, but good food.
Yeah, and can I just ask, Mara, what is the nature of where your thinking is taking you in this moment? If I may be boldly intrusive. Well, I'm part of a very small team trying to get Agile going. So, wait, hold on just a second. So don't explain the situation, but what's the nature of where your thinking is taking you? Are you seeing like a possibility for a new way of thinking about this? Yeah, well, a new way of having conversations. Yes. And a new way of understanding, empathizing with Yeah.
perspectives that I'm not on the same page with.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. So thank you for being willing to go there, Mara, and thank you for being willing to be the first person to speak. If you got something out of that brief dialogue between Mara and I, can you put your thumb up just so I can get a sense of, like, you know, and put your thumb in front of the camera if you got something out of that. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Great. All right. Thank you. So where else? Who else has a question or a thought, or maybe Shaheen, you want to come in?
We have one comment from Athena and a question from Tillman.
Okay.
Athena, do you want to comment, or that was just a comment? Do you want to talk about? Yeah. Okay.
Hello, Athena. Is it Athena? Is that I'm pronouncing? I think I've met you somewhere.
Yes, I attended years ago the boot camp, the Agile Coach boot camp.
Oh yeah, yes.
Yeah, and I've since went on to get certified in ORSC. So anyway, I see what you've been talking about, the predict and plan behaviors. I tend to kind of think of that as preconditioned behaviors, and they exist. My suspicion is they exist because it's been passed down over the years. This is how it is. Deal with it.
Yeah.
We don't care about your feelings. Just deal with it. Business is not personal. But what I've seen is business is personal for a lot of people, because to build relationships is personal. Yeah. So what I'd like to ask you is, if people get so resistant to talking about feelings and soft skills and all that, because for them, business is not personal. What are some ways that you basically were able to influence them to be more open to that in the workplace, so that it is more palatable?
Yeah, it's a really great question. Thank you for that, Athena. And so keep your microphone on in case you want to interrupt me. So first of all, I'm going to respond to this question within the context of the topic of this session, which is growing Agile leadership from the inside out, and Agile leadership as an everywhere phenomenon. So what I want to be able to do in moving towards sense and respond leadership in myself is that I want to be able to recognize the legitimacy of multiple perspectives. So that's one of the key aspects, or the key qualities of what I would call a sense and respond leadership mindset, which is the ability to hold or deal constructively with multiple perspectives. So there is a perspective that you are speaking to, which is the perspective that, well, feelings don't really have a place in our workplace environment. What they're really saying is that we're not very skillful at dealing with feelings in the workplace environment. Usually that's the condition that we're pointing to. And so I want to have compassion and empathy for that. So rather than me trying to get them to see the value of having a more empathic approach to the full human, I want to first, and this is a kind of an ethical stance for the sense and respond leader, I want to first make sure that that person feels like their perspective is being heard and valued by me. Mm-hmm. And for me, that's the most important thing, to, so that Agile is ultimately about relationships. So that's not the topic of this, but an aspect of Evolvagility is the idea that organizations, the lowest level atomic particle of organizations are not individuals, but relationships. And the strength of our relationships is, for me, more important than anything else. And so what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to create an atmosphere of conversation and dialogue with people whose perspectives might be different than my own, or my preferred perspectives, in order to find what's the nature of the intelligence that wants to emerge here with these people in this moment. So what does this make you think of, Athena?
First thing I thought of is the idea that everyone is right partially.
Yeah.
So I think when because that's a sensitive issue, and I sense that that's a sensitive issue, you're right. When you come from a place of trust, and so when you say empathy and compassion, when you say that, you know, that's fine, it's okay to think that way, but have you also realized that you might not be the only one to have this view of the world? However, others don't view the world the way you do, and then go from there. It's like a starting point.
Yeah, and if the you you're referring to is me, like speaking from the perspective of Athena, I'm completely with you on that. That in any kind of interaction, my attention is first on the quality of the relationship. Then we can get to the content of whatever it is that we're talking about. Cool. Is that helpful, useful for you, Athena?
Yeah, it is. Thank you.
Yeah, for others, is that useful? Okay.
I think this is a good segue to the question that Tillman had.
Oh, okay. Can I just briefly do a process check, Shaheen? So how are we doing in this? Is this meeting your hopes and expectations for this session?
Mine?
To you, Shaheen. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Cool. All right. So what's the question? Actually, who is it? And maybe they could speak directly.
Yeah, Tillman here. Yeah.
Oh, Tillman. Hi. Yes.
Yeah.
Hi.
So, well, it relates to how what you talked about is inner development of the inner leadership. I heard that at least from your, how that relates to looking more at the system of relationships that you just mentioned. And especially when I work with the Scrum team of developers, I come from a background of personal development coaching kind of on an individual basis, but I'm kind of hesitant to actually bring it very much into that environment at the moment, because I feel it's really more about the whole team, and I don't want to go too much into individual interactions except where people, explicitly ask it from me to go that way. So I find it very interesting to think about how to bring it more into that environment, but just like to hear your opinion on the relationship of kind of system and individual development. So and how to push it maybe, or whether at all to push it as a coach or a Scrum Master.
So one thing I would like to suggest to you is that if you've had any training in professional coaching, it's that training. I think of the training that people get in professional coaching as training in developing yourself in skillful conversation. And skillful conversation has to do with being able to relate with another person, which means being able to honor and hold their perspective even when it's different than yours. So that's the first kind of aspect of coaching skillfulness. And the other aspect of coaching skillfulness is to engage in a conversation such that the other person that something in the other person might shift, or actually something in both that person and me can shift in that conversation. Something in our mindset can shift. So those are the kind of inherent qualities that I see when we're trained in professional coaching. Those particular skills are applicable anywhere. So I was trained in professional coaching around the time that I started coaching Scrum teams. And I just started asking Scrum teams powerful questions. So what's the hardest part about that? For example, what's important about that? And then being able to relate with people The other aspect of all of this is being able to, in a sense, you're modeling something that people observe, and to the degree that they're invited to do so, they start to enact some of those behaviors themselves. So let me just check in with you, Tilman. How is this doing for you?
It's actually not 100% to my maybe situation or the background maybe I'm thinking of, because maybe because of the training I have, and also the kind of the view I have of especially this capacity that you talked about, kind of holding a space for opposite or uncertainty, let's say, is for me very much related to also sort of a bodily experience and sort of a sort of bodily practice. So the coaching I do is also working very much with the body and with actually doing something, not just talking. So it's kind of a little bit, let's say, stranger than just, you know, putting in some questions into a conversation, which can be kind of more easily done, I think, in an environment. But this requires, I think, a little bit of safer space for people to go into that, I guess, or for me to do it. So.
Yeah. So the thing that I always want to honor is what are people able to tolerate? What is it that people are able to tolerate? Because I'm trained in all kinds of advanced, you know, group dynamic coaching skills, which inform how I approach things. And so that's the thing that I'm wanting to get at, that all of that training could be informing, and probably is informing, how you approach things. And there may be a place for you to look. A place for you to look might be what happens for you bodily when things aren't going, or you're not going as you think it should, or as you think you want it to. Like, what's going on in my body right now?
Yeah.
And how can I be choiceful in this moment, as opposed to being directed by what's going on in my body? And you don't even need to talk about bodily or ontological coaching or any of that kind of stuff with your teams to be able to do that work with yourself. And to the degree that you're doing that work with yourself, something new will show up with your team. That would be my...
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much. It's definitely resonates. Yeah.
Good. And just so you know, Tilman and others who are asking questions, partly what I'm doing here is I'm replying directly to those questions, but I'm also speaking to the topic of the session and, you know, to everybody else. Cool. All right. So what's next? Where should we go next?
We had one question from Gurtej, but he left, and one from Oscar.
Okay. Who's
Oscar? Do you want to ask the question that you have?
Hello.
Oscar. Hi, Oscar.
Hi. I'm sorry for my accent. I come from France. I do my best for English.
Speak slowly. Speak slowly for me, Oscar.
Okay. So my perception is, when I started to introduce Agile in France, for example, sometimes you have resistance. Sometimes you have to find techniques. Which your recommendation? We know Agile involves organizations to change some of the behaviors in project management. What you recommend to Agile readers in order to overcome the resistance for change and to help organizations to resolve this kind of conflicts?
Yeah. So I have a different way of thinking about resistance, and I don't necessarily presume that people are resisting because they don't like what's going on. I presume that any number of things could be going on. And so what I might do in those kinds of situations is I might engage in a conversation that could go something like this.
Okay.
So what would be, Oscar, do you have a very brief example of what a resistance would look like something you could say in a sentence or two, so we can
Yes,
speak.
so for example, when you migrate the project from waterfall mode to agile mode.
Okay, so there are some people, and there's some people who don't want to move from the waterfall to the agile.
Yes,
Yeah.
some people want to stay with waterfall because especially in France, you don't like change.
Yeah.
We don't like change in France. We are not flexible. So you have to negotiate with people. You have to find a model. Some use a Kotel model, for example, or Godrat model in order to overcome change. So what's your recommendation about when you migrate, for example, for waterfall to people to bring change?
Okay, so first of all, Oscar, you seem like a very playful guy.
Mm-hmm.
I would be very playful about this. And you could say something, wow, so tell me, so here's where I'm standing. I'm going to speak for Oscar. So here's where Oscar, stand on this. I actually think that this could get you more of what you want, but that presumes that I know what it is that you want. What is it that you're wanting?
Yeah. So,
forget about Agile, forget about waterfall. What is it that you really want? And I would speak to the person individually, not abstractly. Oh, I want our customers to love our products. No, what do you want personally? What is it what are you in this game for? Because you're in this game for something. What is it? So begin to create a relationship with this person, beginning with validating, assuming that wherever they're at is the perfect place for them. And given where they're at, let's have a conversation. And you know what? There could be an opening. And there may be an opening in this conversation. There may not be an opening in this conversation. There may not be an opening in a conversation you have with them in a month from now. But if you keep having conversations like that with people, openings will start to show up, because people only resist things when they feel that something's being shoved down their throat. Okay. And guess what? You're probably shoving stuff down people's throats. We all do. I mean, we think that's our job, but it's not.
Yes.
Is this useful for you?
Exactly that, yes. Yes.
Yeah. So you see it like an opportunity for a new way to approach a situation for yourself, Oscar?
Yes, I worked for 3 projects, and it was very hard to convict people to lead change, especially in the project waterfall migration, from waterfall to agile project management. It was very, very hard.
Okay, good, good. All right, cool.
And many conflicts appear, we face some conflict between teams.
So I'm going to interrupt you, Oscar. Can I give you some little feedback?
Yes.
Is this okay? Everyone, is this okay that we're doing this? I mean, I'm sorry, I didn't, Shaheen and I agreed that we were going to do this, because here's the thing. I can do PowerPoint slides when I'm in a in-person presentation, because I can interact with people. If I put PowerPoint slides up, I can't see anybody. And then the whole thing becomes about these PowerPoint slides. And I don't think anything really meaningful can happen in an online environment that way. So this is the way that I like to be able to work with people. So Oscar, if I could just give you some feedback. You are a delightful man. And you're most delightful when you don't talk as much. Is that okay that I said that to you?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Oscar.
Yeah. Thank you.
So I guess the next question is with Paul. He has a very interesting question to ask you. Paul, do you want to ask it yourself?
Yeah, sure. Can you guys hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Hi, Michael.
Hi.
So Monday I'm going into a new organization. So I'm going in as a new leader into an organization. What would say your approach be for the first 30 days?
Be quiet and observe.
That's what I thought. And buy lots of coffees, right?
Yeah, have lots of conversations with people. So and to turn this back to, you know, like the you know, a sense and respond leadership and everywhere leadership and agile leadership culture from the inside out, to kind of turn it back to those themes. What I would want to do in those first 30 days, coming from that perspective, is I would want to, first of all, I would want to find out what's going on. And I would want to help people begin to see what's going on using myself as a kind of a mirror. Because one of the beautiful things about that first 30 days is that you don't know anything. And so it's really cool to be able to come from that I don't know anything place and hold up a mirror and have conversations where you're building lots of relationships, because ultimately my view is that and we're moving into the territory of kind of like an enterprise coach, is that what you're wanting to do is foster the emergence of relationship systems, or the emergence of greater relationship system capability. And one of the ways that I know to do that is to have lots of conversations with people.
Okay.
Is that, what do you take from that?
Yeah, I was thinking along those same lines. And then the first thing is no change. Make no change. I was going to go and just listen. I wasn't even going to use terms.
Yeah. Yes.
I just want to observe, listen, be the fly on the wall, see what people know, what they don't know. Not try and change anyone's ways. Like you said, build those relationships. I want to find out from the team what they expect of me as well, right? As well as, you know, their system. Let's call the team a system. Yeah. You know, the roles and what everyone, the dynamics of the team, in a sense.
Yeah. So what I would caution you, Paul, is to see if you can find unfamiliar places to come from in your own thinking.
Oh, okay.
Like, notice whether or not you're using like phrases to describe what you're doing that feel familiar to you.
Okay.
And see if you can find other phrases. I'm going to take a moment just to make a plug for the book, Evolvagility. This is not, for me, this book is not about selling books. It's really about introducing an integration of ideas and disciplines that I have found really, really useful over all the years that I've been working with people. And one of the dangers that I see in the Agile world with Agile coaches is they go from engagement to engagement. And what they do is they think what they're doing is building on their experience, and that's partly what's going on. But what they are really doing is solidifying a vocabulary that they use again and again and again because it feels right. I mean, after all, it worked in the last engagement. Of course, we don't know whether that's what had it work. We don't know what has anything work. And so my recommendation for you and for anybody else is to find a way to develop your own inner flexibility of mind, so you don't get stuck in a hard-shelled vocabulary that limits your capacity to think from to sense and respond. Actually, it's a very predict and plan approach to doing these things. We create this baggage of vocabulary, and we get more and more experience. And as an Agile coach, and that vocabulary gets the cement gets more and more. It gets more and more hard cased, and I would want to just throw all of that cement off with each new engagement, preferably each new day, and find out what's one new vocabulary I might introduce today in my own thinking, and see what happens. Is this making sense?
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. I really appreciate your advice.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Paul. Thank you for the question.
I guess I have time for one or two more questions. One question that Gurjit asked is resonating with what I had in mind. If anyone has any questions, you guys go ahead. Otherwise, I'll ask the last question from Michael. No? Good. So, Michael, the question that Gurjit has was about in large organizations, when they are building Agile COE, let's say, there is someone that's deciding to build this COE, and COE Center of Excellence, they hire a Scrum Master and Agile coaches, but that person himself is not an Agile person, but that person is managing all the other people that is in charge of Agile. So, so he was asking how to work in this kind of environment, or how should we act in. My side of the question would be, if the leaders don't know how to lead, or from our perspective, they can lead better in a better way, what shall we do about that?
So I'm gonna, given the conversations we've been having, I'm gonna open that out to anybody else to respond to, and I'll work with you.
Okay.
Because I feel like I'm gonna say kind of what I've already been saying. So what maybe Shaheen, what do you think I might say to that?
Oh, Mara wants to say something.
Mara?
Yeah.
Oh, great, Mara, come on in.
Well, I'm guessing you'd say have the conversation with that leader and understand what they want.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing stopping you coaching your manager. I've done that before, even when I wasn't an Agilist.
Yeah. And
So coaching meeting through the conversation, sort of. Yeah. Anyway.
So it's great, Mara. And who wants to build on that?
I'll add to that what you were saying about building relationships.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And what would you say about that in this particular situation?
So in this particular situation, I would approach it building relationship with the leader and the peers that I might have as a coach and Scrum Master. So if I can build a relationship at that level, and then we can influence the leader, relationship with the leader, all of us, it would be more impactful even.
Yeah. So so what you're pointing to, thank you both, Mara and Shaheen, what the two of you are pointing to is one of the practices that's described in the book. So the book describes a whole suite of practices to be able to bring this kind of thinking to life. So it's actually, in many ways, the book is philosophical, but it's also extremely practical. And one of the big practices in the book and also in our workshops is something we call shared sense making. And shared sense making is when people come together to tackle a problem. And part of what they do, they don't just talk about the problem as a content, which tends to keep it stuck, but they talk about, okay, what's the nature of the way we are making sense of this problem, and how is that contributing to our way of seeing the problem? And is there a different way that we as a group, whether it's 2 of us, 3 of us, 5 of us, is there a different way that we might make sense of it such that we have different access to this problem? And given that, what might be some actions we might take or experiments we might make to find out more about the nature of the sense that we're making of this situation? Mm-hmm. And so that's an example of a very specific practice. So one of the things I want to emphasize here, when we talk about this nature of leadership, it's not just like waving our hands and, like hope for the best, but it's like, it's kind of like Scrum is a framework of practices, events, and roles, very, very specifically defined, which, if followed, can help teams get good at things like collaboration, focus, courage, commitment, all that kind of stuff. And similarly, Evolvagility is a technology that helps people get good, develop skillfulness in this kind of what I call small L everywhere leadership. So there's a lot of skills that we can grow within ourselves and among ourselves in our relationships with others. Do we have time for? Yes, Athena has her hand up. Please.
Oh, you are
Athena? We can't hear you.
I'm double muted.
Okay, all right.
So, Yeah, I really like this idea of shared sense making, and I'm going to tack on also what Tillman was referring to earlier. I think it's great to get people out of the headspace, because all the kinds of arguments that people have start up here. But if you take that out and you do talk about, let's not talk about Agile for a moment. And I like the whole get their other senses about this, because there's more knowledge and more information, more questions that you can get out of utilizing all your other senses that they might not realize they're holding. It's great to do that. It's helpful.
Yeah, thank you for that. You point to so many things that it's just not possible to even mention in a brief session. But one of the things you point to is our own, what in the book we call action logic, which is an inner sense-making operating system that's going on, for the most part, outside of our awareness. And one of the things we want to be able to do is be deliberate about making that inner sense-making, that inner action logic, more visible, so that we can see how it's affecting how we, our actions, our behaviors, and then be able to shift that. And that is ultimately what a mindset shift is about. It's about shifting the inner operating system of our sense making, so that we can be more choiceful in how we're making sense in any given moment. Given that sense making is essentially the foundation on which we build our actions and behaviors and skillfulness and all of that stuff. I think that we might be near the end, or we have time for one more. So how Mara?
Sorry. Another way of,
no apologies.
am I mute? No.
No, you're here.
Another way of thinking about that is, if you're seeing the similar kind of argument happening over and over again about a content item, then what you're finding is whenever you think you've landed that as done, it's resolved, it's actually you haven't, because you've only solved the surface example and not what's underlying as far as the process you're having in getting to an agreement on something.
Yeah, that's great.
Process of
beautifully put, Mara. And here's the thing about agreement. Agreement is not what we're trying to go for. Actually, trying to go for agreement is one of the things that most corrupts human relationship systems, because we become invested in agreement, and that we want to have agreement regardless of anything else. And so we rush to agreement, even though oftentimes those agreements are false. They're not real. And so they become very brittle, and any change in the circumstance breaks the feeling of the fact that we are in agreement, and then we start arguing again. What we really want to focus on is alignment. Like, to what degree are we aligned on the purpose of what we're trying to do together? And to what degree can we make sense of what's going on around us, so that we're better empowered to face the situation that we're in?
Okay. I want to thank you once again, Michael, as we are approaching the time. Thank you so much for starting our series of webinars. Thank you, participants, for joining us and making a very insightful conversation. And I'm going to send out some of the information and the link to Michael's book if you guys want to later on read about that. Anything else you want to say, Michael, to close off the session?
Find me on LinkedIn and connect, and be looking for announcements of, if you're interested, if you want to go further. There are other things that we're planning to do, including as you mentioned, we have workshops in Europe right now. We're bringing workshops to North America. And there's also going to be some online things that we'll be starting to do. So we're just getting all of this stuff started up. I just finished the book. And so we're looking for more. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you. Let's give Michael a round of applause. Thanks, Michael.
All right.
Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you, Shaheen. Bye-bye.